Hey kiddos, today for our lesson we are going to be talking about types of lines. So there's many types of lines and we're going to be talking about 3 types of lines. 3 types of lines are parallel lines, perpendicular lines, intersecting lines. Let's say those again. Ready? Parallel lines, perpendicular lines, intersecting lines. One more time. Here we go. Parallel lines, perpendicular lines, intersecting lines. So, what are parallel lines? Parallel lines are lines that never cross. They look like this. Those lines will never ever cross. So for a hint, look at the L's in the word parallel. That is a set of parallel lines. Those L's will never ever touch. So parallel lines means that they're lines that will never ever cross. Put your arms like this. Those are parallel lines. These 2 lines will never touch. Put your arms like this. These are also parallel lines. Those parallel lines will never ever touch. So parallel lines never ever cross. So remember that parallel lines has the double L's, and that means they will never cross. All right, this next one here is also parallel. Look around your room and look for parallel lines. If I was looking for parallel lines in the classroom, here is one set of parallel lines. Notice that these lines back here will never ever touch each other. So what kind of parallel lines do you have at your house or at your school? All right. Now let's talk about perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that cross to make right angles. Remember, a right angle has a square in the corner. Right angles make perfect T's or perfect L's. When we are talking about perpendicular lines, we are looking for perfect T's. So, perpendicular lines look like this. They must be a perfect T. That is a perpendicular line. So, parallel lines never touch. Perpendicular lines make perfect T's. All right, so let's look around the room for perpendicular lines. What lines in your house will always cross to make perfect T's? Well, in our classroom, we have perfect T's in our blocks where they meet in our room. We have perfect T's on the calendar and perfect T's on the walls. So where in your house has perfect T's? Now let's talk about intersecting lines. Intersecting lines can cross anywhere. So they do not always make right angles. Intersecting lines look like this. They can cross anywhere. So if I'm talking about an intersecting line, I could cross here, or I could cross here. I could cross over here at the very tip. All of those are intersecting lines. Now, perpendicular lines are intersecting. If I make a perfect T, they are perpendicular, but they are also intersecting. They cross. So, some lines are just intersecting. If they don't make a perfect T, it's just intersecting. But if it makes a perfect T, they are perpendicular and intersecting. All right, let's say each word again together. Here we go. Parallel lines. Perpendicular lines. Intersecting lines. All right, let's practice. Can you please get out a whiteboard and a marker or a piece of paper and a pencil? Pause the video, and when you are ready, press play. Do you think these lines are parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? Please write PA for parallel, PE for perpendicular, or I for intersecting. These lines are intersecting. They just cross. Remember, intersecting lines are just lines that cross. Let's try another one. What kind of lines are these? Please write down PA for parallel, PE for perpendicular, or I for intersecting. Those lines are parallel. They will never ever touch. Remember, these look like two L's, and parallel has two L's in them. So parallel lines will never ever touch. What is this? Are these parallel lines, perpendicular lines, or intersecting lines? Well, if you said intersecting, you are correct. Those lines are crossing. But you actually should have also said perpendicular. Do you see how these lines make a perfect T? If it makes a perfect T, then they are perpendicular. But remember, if they are perpendicular, they must also be intersecting. All right, what about this? Are those lines parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? You can write PA for parallel, PE for perpendicular, or I for intersecting. If you chose that those lines are intersecting, you are correct. Remember that intersecting lines can cross anywhere. What about this? What kind of lines are these? Are these lines parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? If you said that these lines are perpendicular, you are correct. Remember, perpendicular lines make perfect T's, but also you must choose intersecting. If you choose perpendicular, perfect T's, you must also choose that they are intersecting, because remember, intersecting lines cross anywhere. All right, let's say the word. Say them with me. Parallel lines, perpendicular lines, intersecting lines. All right, let's practice. What kind of lines are these? Are these lines parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? If you chose that these lines are intersecting, you are correct. These lines are just crossing anywhere. Therefore, they are intersecting. What about these lines? Are these lines parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? If you chose that these lines are parallel, you are correct. Remember that these look like two L's. Two L's are in the word parallel, so these are parallel lines. They will never ever cross. What about this? Are these lines parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting? If you chose that these lines are perpendicular, you are correct. Perpendicular lines make perfect T's, but you must also choose intersecting, because intersecting lines are also perpendicular. Remember, intersecting lines can cross anywhere. What about these lines? Are these lines parallel lines, perpendicular lines, or intersecting lines? If you chose that these lines are intersecting, you are correct. Those lines are just crossing anywhere. Parallel lines do not touch. Perpendicular lines must make a perfect T. All right, let's say these words together. Parallel lines, perpendicular lines, intersecting lines. All right, let's go over our hand motions. Here we go. Show me parallel. Parallel lines never ever cross. Show me perpendicular. Perpendicular make perfect T's. Show me intersecting. Intersecting lines can cross anywhere. Show me parallel. Parallel lines will never ever touch. Show me perpendicular. Perpendicular lines make perfect T's. Show me intersecting. Intersecting lines can cross anywhere. All right, kiddos, now we are going to need to get out our workbook, and we are going to need to turn to page 716. So if you could, please get out your books and turn to page 716. We are going to go ahead and get started. Let's look at number 1. Which sides appear to be parallel? Remember that parallel lines have the double L's. That means that these lines will never ever touch. Which lines look like they will never ever touch? Well, line B and line D will never ever touch. So those are considered parallel. Please write B and D on the line. Are there any other lines that will never ever touch? Well, line C and line A are also parallel. Line C will never touch line A. So also write C and A. Those lines will never ever touch each other. All right, let's look at number 2. It says, look at the green sides of the polygon. Tell if they appear to be intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel. So these are the green lines on your workbook. Do those lines look like they are parallel? They will never ever touch? Do they look perpendicular, perfect T's? Or do they look intersecting? They will cross anywhere. What do you think? Those lines are parallel. Those lines will never ever touch. All right, kiddos, write parallel. All right, what about number 3? Number 3 has lines that look like this. Do they look like they are parallel, lines that will never ever touch, perpendicular, perfect T's, or intersecting? They are lines that will always cross. All right, well, they are touching. That can't be parallel. Do you think this makes perfect T's? No, that means it just is an intersecting line. Please write that that is intersecting. All right, kiddos, here's our next set of lines. What do those lines look like? Now, sometimes it helps to extend the line because then I can see things that I may not have seen before. So it's okay to write in your book and to extend your lines. So let's look at this line. Are those lines parallel? They never ever touch. Are they perpendicular, make perfect T's, or intersecting, cross anywhere? Well, they're definitely not parallel. Those lines are touching. They're crossing. Well, did they make a perfect T? Yes, I see a perfect T. Those lines are perpendicular. Well, are they intersecting? Did they cross? Did those lines cross? Yes, they also crossed. If I pick perpendicular, I must also pick intersecting because perpendicular lines are intersecting lines. Please pause the video, write those down, and when you are ready, please press play. All right, we're on the next shape. Now we are looking at this set of lines. We must again determine if they're intersecting, cross anywhere, perpendicular, perfect T's, or parallel. They will never ever touch. So, what do you think those lines are? If you think that they are parallel, you are correct. Those lines will never ever touch. So please write the word parallel on the line. All right, what about the next one? Again, it helps to extend your lines because if you extend your lines, it's easier to tell what it is. So, first, parallel. Are those lines touching or not? Well, they're touching, so it can't be parallel. Parallel lines never ever cross. Are they perpendicular? Do they make perfect T's? Yes, I see a perfect T. So it is perpendicular. Perpendicular lines make perfect T's. All right, are they intersecting? Are those lines crossing? If you said yes, you are correct. They are also intersecting. When you choose perpendicular, you must also choose intersecting. All right, what about these lines? Let's extend our line. So what do you think on that one? Are they parallel? They will never ever touch? Well, they're touching, so it can't be parallel. Are they perpendicular? Do they make perfect T's? No, that's definitely not a perfect T. Well, are they intersecting? Do they cross each other? Yes, those lines are just intersecting lines. Pause the video, make sure that you have all of those filled in, and then when you are ready, please press play. All right, next we are going to be looking at the blocks on this page. You have block A, block B, block C, block D, and block E. We are going to need to look at those shapes to decide if we can write them down to answer the questions. So let's look. Chelsea wants to sort pattern blocks by the types of sides. Which blocks have intersecting sides? So which ones have sides that will touch each other? Well, let's go through all of them. First, let's go through A. Do those have sides that cross? Yes, so A is true. Does B have sides that cross? Yes, B has sides that cross. Does C have sides that cross? Yes, C has sides that cross. Does D have sides that cross? Yes. Does E have sides that cross? Yes. So every single shape on our paper has intersecting lines. Number 9, which blocks have parallel lines? Well, let's review. Parallel lines are lines that will never ever touch. So we are looking for shapes that would have lines that would never ever touch each other. So let's see if we can find any. First, start with shape A. Do you see any sides that will never ever touch? Well, the top of the shape and the bottom of the shape will never ever touch. So A has parallel sides. What about B? Are they have any lines that will never ever touch? Well, these lines touch and these lines touch. B does not. It has all lines that intersect. Well, what about C? Well, what about the top and the bottom? Will the top and the bottom ever touch each other? No. So, C has parallel sides. Remember, parallel sides means it will never ever touch. Let's look at D. What about the top and the bottom? Will those lines ever touch? No, they will not. So, those also have parallel sides. What about E? Does that have parallel sides? Well, this will never touch this. So E also has parallel sides. All right, kiddos, our next question. Which blocks have perpendicular sides? Perpendicular means that we have made perfect T's. Do you see any shapes that make perfect T's? I only see one shape that would make a perfect T. Do you see the one shape that would make a perfect T? Well, the only one shape that would make perfect T's is the square. Perfect T's are only found in squares and rectangles. So if it is not a square or a rectangle, it would not have perpendicular sides. This is a hexagon. It does not have perfect T's. This is a triangle. Now, sometimes triangles do have perpendicular sides. So this one could be a triangle, could have perpendicular, but this one doesn't. It would have to have a perfect L like this to be perpendicular. This one does not. That is called a parallelogram. This is a trapezoid. Trapezoids sometimes have perpendicular sides, It depends if they have perfect L's or not. So, all the time, squares and rectangles would have perpendicular sides. So, your correct answer there is E. All right, kiddos. Let me check and make sure we have everything we need. All right, let's go ahead and look at our paper for a grade. On our paper for a grade, let's look at our directions. First, look at the dashed sides of the polygon. Tell if they appear to be intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel. Well, let's write some notes. Intersecting lines cross anywhere. Perpendicular lines are perfect T's, and parallel lines are lines that never ever touch. So, you are doing the stripe lines. So you would be doing those lines there, those lines, these lines, and these lines. You will have to decide. Now remember that if you choose perpendicular, you must also choose intersecting. So some lines will have more than one answer. So again, be very careful. If you choose perpendicular, you must also choose intersecting. On number 7, which shapes appear to have parallel lines? Well, I will tell you that there are 3 answers for that question. There are 3 answers for number 7. Number 8, which shapes appear to have perpendicular sides? Remember that perpendicular sides are perfect T's. Which shapes make perfect T's? I will tell you that there are 2 answers for number 8. You do not need to do number 9. All right, let's look at our next page. Our next page says, how many pairs of parallel sides does this quadrilateral appear to have? Think of it like a pair of socks. You must have 2 socks to make 1 pair. So how many pairs of parallel sides, lines that never ever cross, is in this shape? Number 2, which sides appear to be parallel? Again, parallel lines will never ever cross. So blank and blank are together, and blank are together. There are 2 sets. Please write which lines appear to be parallel. All right, for number 3, you are to tell me the name of the polygon. If I were you, I would first count the sides, then decide on the name. Is it a triangle, a quadrilateral, a pentagon, a hexagon, a decagon, or an octagon? How many angles greater than a right angle does this shape have? A greater than a right. How many of those do you see? On number 5, you are to count the line segments. Remember, I would get out a marker and I would count my line segments like that. Number 6 says, what fraction names the shaded part? In our class, we draw a fraction line. Anytime it says fraction. We eat the top of the fraction, so whatever is shaded is what we eat, and the total is always on the bottom. All right, kiddos, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.